This is NBC Nightly News, Friday, January 7th, with John Chancellor and David Brinkley reporting from the NBC News Center in New York.
Good evening. In Plains, Jimmy Carter told the leaders of Congress today he would like to see about $30 billion spent over 2 years for making jobs for the unemployed and some small cuts in taxes. The leaders generally said they thought this was a good idea, pleasing to them, and said they would move fast to get it through Congress. John Cochran is in Plains, and here's his report.
This was the first pilgrimage to Plains for most of these veteran Democrats. They were not looking for a fight with their party's leader, even those who had been unenthusiastic about a general tax cut like House Ways and Means Chairman Al Ullman predicted a compromise. Mr. Carter welcomed that.
But Mr. Carter acknowledged he will not meet his goal of lowering unemployment by 1.5% this year. He now talks of a 1% reduction or less. But he says he can meet his other target of increasing production by 6%. And his top economic advisor says all this can be done with no increase in inflation. John Cochran, NBC News, Plains.
There's been a lot of speculation about what Mr. Carter's economic prescription would contain. More emphasis on cutting taxes or more emphasis on creating jobs? Well, the answer is that the emphasis at first will be on cutting taxes. Later, the emphasis will be on jobs. Irving R. Levine has been studying Mr. Carter's plan.
Creating jobs for people, such as these applicants for unemployment insurance, was what Jimmy Carter had said would receive priority in his economic stimulus plan. But as it turned out, more money will go for tax reductions this year than for jobs, because it takes less time to get money into people's pockets through tax rebates than by creating jobs. The Carter Jobs Plan will expand already existing programs, such as the National Job Corps, which now is training about 250,000 uneducated young people for useful work. Also to be expanded is an on-the-job training program in which private employers, such as this restaurant, are subsidized by the government to train unskilled young men and women. About 500,000 are now in this program. The biggest expansion will come in public service jobs, in which 300,000 people now work for communities, repairing buildings, working on roads, schools, and parks.
Carter's emphasis on tax reduction rather than on jobs displeases George Meany and other union leaders. They want the government to spend $30 billion on jobs this year alone, but President-elect Carter has decided on only a fraction of that amount. Irving R. Levine, NBC News, Washington.
President Ford sent the Congress a series of proposals on energy today, which amounted mainly to a summary of past proposals. But he did not include anything about his belief that price controls on gasoline should be lifted. That proposal has drawn considerable opposition in the Congress. Not much movement on the stock markets today, but for the week, the news was not good. The Dow Jones Industrials lost more than 21 points in the first trading week of the new year. David?
Other news coming up. One tanker full of oil is assumed to have sunk, and another was stuck in the mud, but now it is floating again, and there is no spill. Some news on the Legionnaire's disease and the swine flu. A county requires welfare recipients to work. Snow across the country. And Pasadena is willing to have the Super Bowl, but is not exactly thrilled about it.
Oh, what a night. Mama stuffed zucchini with garlic sauce. Aunt Fanny's flaming Swedish meatballs. And 3 minutes of conversation with my nitwit cousin Iggy. Such a heartburn. I need relief, and make it fast.
Alka-2 gives you fast relief. It chews fast, and it works fast, too. Alka-2 is built to fall apart fast.
Cool and creamy. Not as chalky, not as gritty. Alka-2. When you need relief from heartburn, make it fast.
If you are lucky enough to get this new sweepstakes letter from Reader's Digest, just think. You could be one of over 35,000 people who will win up to $50,000 in cash. In the new Reader's Digest sweepstakes, $450,000 will be awarded, including that $50,000 grand prize. So watch your mailbox. Send in your entry. It's the only way to win.
The Coast Guard today found 2 life jackets floating in the Atlantic with the words Grand Zenith on them. That's the name of the Panamanian oil tanker with more than 8 million gallons of oil aboard, which has been missing in this general area. It looks now as though the ship is sunk. Here's more from Lee McCarthy.
The life jackets from the Grand Zenith were found floating about 300 miles east-southeast of Cape Cod, and there were other signs that the tanker had in fact sunk.
We found 2 additional items, a trunk and a mattress, and they were about 10 miles northwest of the life jackets.
What in addition to the life jackets were found at the first site?
Well, we found the usual amount of debris, wood and so on, and then, of course, we also found an oil slick.
When you find that kind of stuff in the open ocean, is there any way to make a guesstimate as to what might have happened or even where it might have happened?
No, it would be very difficult to estimate what happened, but the probability is that the ship sank within 50 miles of those life jackets.
The Coast Guard will continue searching for survivors through Sunday night. If none is found, it will be a pretty good indication that the 38 men aboard the Panamanian tanker have been lost at sea. Lee McCarthy, NBC News, Boston.
While most oil tankers don't sink or run aground, it has seemed lately an unusual number of them have, with results ranging from small messes to major disasters. Now, in the Gulf of Mexico off Port Arthur, Texas, another one was stuck in the mud today, a Liberian tanker with 13 million gallons of oil. The rising tide refloated it tonight, and no oil was spilled. It's the 7th Liberian tanker in trouble in U.S. waters in 3 weeks. John?
Frank Sinatra's mother is missing. She was in a small 2-engine plane on her way to see Sinatra open in a show in Las Vegas, but the plane is missing in the San Bernardino Mountains in California, not far from Palm Springs. The plane was last observed on radar about 24 hours ago. The country there is very rugged, and search teams are working in heavy snow with more snow on the way. Mrs. Sinatra is 82 years old. David?
An animal disease center in Iowa suggests the Legionnaire's disease could have come from bacteria spread by birds, but this is not confirmed. But so far, neither is anything else. And at the Federal Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, they are now pretty sure the paralysis that hit several hundred people was connected with a swine flu vaccine somehow. Kenley Jones has more on this.
Scientists at the Center for Disease Control have been examining records of the Salk polio vaccination program of the 1950s to see whether Guillain-Barré syndrome developed as a reaction to that vaccine. Their preliminary findings are negative, but the scientists now confirm that some current Guillain-Barré cases are definitely a reaction to the swine flu vaccine.
Yes, I think it's fair to say that some type of reaction has developed in some of the recipients, a very small number of the recipients of the vaccine, of the swine flu vaccine, causing Guillain-Barré syndrome.
Dr. Brockman said there is no way to tell which recipients will develop Guillain-Barré and which will not. He said the vaccine was adequately tested.
Oh, yes, there's nothing you could not find anything in the vaccine that would have predicted this would have happened. The testing was very adequate, and there's no test that now we or others are aware of that would have allowed any prediction of this, that this was going to happen, to have been predicted.
Given the risk of Guillain-Barré, officials here say it is highly unlikely the swine flu vaccination program will resume this year unless there is a widespread flu epidemic. Kenley Jones, NBC News, Atlanta.
Winter weather, lots of it, much of it bad. A big storm swept up the East Coast, closing thousands of schools and seeping snow into millions of galoshes. Another storm, described officially as a potential killer, eased across the Canadian border into the upper Middle West. There was even snow in Southern California. Robert Hager has been out in the bad weather.
The storm moved up the East Coast from the south. Washington residents awoke to about 5 inches of snow, a pretty big storm by that city's standards, and the second of the week for the capital. By early morning, the snow had reached New York. Speed limits had to be reduced on highways leading in and out of the city. But the accumulation in New York was less than expected, only a few inches. Boston was the last and hardest hit East Coast city. Logan Airport was alternately opened and closed throughout the day. Up to a foot of snow is expected before the storm leaves New England. Meantime, another storm in the far west left snow in Southern California. Skiers there were happy. There hasn't been much snow in the west this year. And as though all of this weren't enough, a real howling blizzard has been predicted for the northern plains states. And back in the northeast, gale warnings are up along the coast. Bitter cold and more snow are expected by Sunday. Meteorologists predicted this would be a colder than average winter. No less a source than the Old Farmer's Almanac said it would tax the heating systems and snow shovels of New England and leave snow on the ground in the middle Atlantic states from Groundhog Day to the first day of spring. Robert Hager, NBC News, New York.
A lower court ruled months ago that the famous Nixon tapes, already used in a court trial, could be made public and put on LP records and played on the air and so on. Well, today, Nixon's lawyers asked the Supreme Court to stop it because they said these tapes will be made the subject of jokes and satire, played at cocktail parties, and used in other embarrassing ways. The court will decide.
Energy for a strong America. To develop more energy, Exxon is going to greater lengths than ever before. This gas well will go down over 3 miles. This offshore platform will tower 100 stories above the ocean floor. This oil field lies 300 miles north of the Arctic Circle. Drilling deeper, building taller, going farther. That's what Exxon people are doing today to provide more energy for a strong America.
When Bill and I were dating, he used to be so romantic. You know, he hasn't changed a bit.
It shouldn't matter that you wear dentures. Today, you have the best cleaning Polident ever. We've added more cleansers, more whitener, and a unique penetrating ingredient that helps lift away odor-causing film to leave dentures clean and up-close fresh. Polident, we want you to stay close.
It's like our new coffee maker.
Still haven't figured what to put in it.
Figure on this. Maxwell House ADC. ADC. Automatic drip coffee. The only kind I sell. Smells good. ADC is specially blended and ground just for the new coffee makers.
Good coffee.
Not surprising. 4 machine makers recommend it, including yours.
West Bend recommends ADC, only from Maxwell House.
The first of the nominees to Jimmy Carter's cabinet to appear before Congress for confirmation was Brock Adams, named to be Secretary of Transportation. There was an informal hearing on his nomination today. Informal because he cannot actually be nominated until Carter is sworn in. But even so, the Senate Commerce Committee members were unanimous in their praise, and he will have no trouble being confirmed. John?
One of the problems with welfare is that when some people get on welfare programs, they stay there. Some because they don't know any other way of life, many others because they can't get out. But in Kent County, Michigan, local officials think they have found a way out. And the way out involves work and study. Al Johnson has the story.
51-year-old Daniel Ensley of Grand Rapids has been on welfare for more than a year. And like other welfare fathers in Kent County, Ensley is required to do public service work if he wants to receive welfare payments. Another way to qualify for welfare is to take vocational training like auto mechanics. Since last September, county officials have been using federal, state, and local money this way to prepare welfare fathers for jobs. Getting used to the rules has been difficult for many of the men.
I wasn't against the classes in the first place. It's just the idea of somebody telling me I have to.
You're a high school grad.
Through job counseling, job training, and vocational classes, Kent County officials have reduced the number of fathers on welfare by 20% since the program started.
Mainly, I just want to get a job right now where I can support my family and live off of.
The welfare director says he has no doubt about the morality or legality of what the county is doing.
In our screening of these people, we found very lethargic people who had given up hope of functioning. And you, in your study of this subject, see how optimistic and outgoing people who are participating are.
But doing menial chores does not stimulate some welfare fathers.
Well, they call it training, but for what? I really don't know.
Kent County officials believe the program is legal, but they say they also would welcome a legal challenge to it. Next week, in any case, they plan to expand the program to include welfare mothers. Al Johnson, NBC News, Grand Rapids, Michigan.
North Carolina's Governor James Holshouser pardoned 2 men accused and convicted of kidnapping. Well, this came about after NBC News on the program Weekend proved they were not guilty. Cy Perlman did the work on it.
In May of 1975, brothers Lonnie and Sandy Sawyer were arrested in Monroe, North Carolina for kidnapping a man and holding him for 10 minutes. At the trial a month later, the victim, Robert Hinson, identified the brothers, and they were convicted and sentenced to a total of 60 years between them. NBC's Weekend uncovered new evidence that 2 other men committed the kidnapping. One of them gave Weekend an on-camera confession. The other suspect denied he took part in the crime, but his car was almost identical to the kidnapped car described by the victim. The Sawyers got a new hearing, but were denied another trial. The judge said they had waited too long. Today, in his last day in office, Governor Holshouser said the Sawyers were innocent and set them free. Cy Perlman, NBC News.
It was 61 years ago when Albert Einstein set forth his famous theory of relativity, of how gravitation works. But for all of those years, there was no way to test the theory with real accuracy. Well, it has now been done with great accuracy by American scientists using signals sent from Viking spacecraft on the surface of Mars and orbiting Mars. The early results show that the theory of relativity is right on the money. Our congratulations to Dr. Einstein.
I'm a housewife and a working mother, and I take Geritol. You see, with the kind of day I put in, I have to take really good care of my health. So I try to get my rest and exercise, and I take Geritol every morning.
Geritol, to be sure you get enough iron, more than twice the iron of any ordinary supplement, and some very important vitamins.
I do a lot for my husband and for my children. Geritol is one thing I do for myself.
Take a look at who takes Geritol, shouldn't you?
I'm not surprised that Sominex is the best-selling sleeping aid in America. It works so well for me, and it must work the same way for others. Those nights when I have trouble falling asleep, I need to relax and feel drowsy. Well, Sominex helps me do just that. I get to sleep, and the next morning I feel really refreshed.
Sominex, America's best-selling sleeping aid. When you sometimes have trouble falling asleep, let Sominex work for you.
Sominex sure works for me.
And here's the latest wall poster news from China. Today, the posters are demanding that Deng Xiaoping, who was disgraced last year, be returned to a position of power. We don't know if the posters reflect official opinion, but the police haven't taken them down. And the man who is getting the most official praise this week is dead. Zhou Enlai, the premier, who died 1 year ago tomorrow. In Peking today, they were preparing a memorial service for Zhou in the Square of Heavenly Peace. Here is more on all of this from Leonard Pratt.
It all started just a year ago when Premier Zhou died. For the last week, however, he's gotten more publicity than any living Chinese leader. For when Zhou died, he probably did not realize that his death would so unsettle China that the country's history would be rewritten twice in the following year. He had always been the great moderator and thought the succession to his government had been arranged. At that time, moderate Vice Premier Deng was Zhou's obvious heir. Zhou had brought him back from political oblivion and put him in charge of China's administration. On the other side of the new government were to be the so-called radicals, the Gang of Four, led by Chairman Mao Zedong's powerful wife. But Zhou Enlai's coalition did not outlive him, and within 9 months, all were thrown out of office. Deng by the Gang of Four, and then the Gang by Deng's old allies in the army. The man who came out on top was Hua Guofeng. Whether on his own or with army support, Hua became chairman in October. And now history has been rewritten. This re-edited film of Zhou Enlai's funeral, released in China this week, contains no mention or pictures of Vice Premier Deng or the purged radicals. Only Hua Guofeng and his supporters are declared to have attended the ceremony. This bolsters their political claim to be the true successors to Zhou Enlai. And in the strange world of Chinese politics, Zhou, for the moment, emerges as the leader to be emulated, rather than the more illustrious Mao Zedong. When these photographs of Zhou's funeral were first taken a year ago, the Chinese people could not have known they were on the verge of political chaos. There have been 2 dramatic changes of government since then, and each time the Chinese have been asked to accept the heroism of the new administration and the villainy of its predecessor. So far, at least, the majority of the people show every sign of supporting this new government in its efforts to restore confidence and order to China. Leonard Pratt, NBC News, Hong Kong.
The federal government says the Boeing company paid out more than $77 million to various foreigners, agents, or consultants to help it sell airplanes. The Securities and Exchange Commission wants their names made public. The State Department does not, saying it would harm international relations. John?
Governor Carlos Romero Barcelo of Puerto Rico said today he is not going to ask for a referendum on the statehood issue. President Ford recently made a surprise proposal that Puerto Rico become the 51st state. The reaction to the Ford proposal was not very favorable either in Congress or on the island. David?
The head of the Colombia coffee exporters says prices will continue to rise for 2 years, which may be true. He also says prices are regulated by the law of supply and demand, which is not true. They are pushed upward to a great extent by higher and higher export taxes in Central and South America. And the head of the psychiatric clinic at Yale New Haven Hospital says coffee drinkers who try to do without it may have headaches, crankiness, rapid heartbeat, insomnia, and lassitude or laziness.
Here's the fastest type relief known for occasional bronchial asthma attacks. Restores free breathing as fast as 15 seconds. It's in Primatene Mist. Or to keep breathing freely for hours, Primatene tablets. In the lungs, Primatene opens clogged breathing tubes, relaxes bronchial spasms, restores free breathing. Primatene Mist, the fastest relief known. Primatene tablets contains the asthma relievers doctors prescribe most.
I am a botanical wizard, and this is a growing idea. Buick Skylark hatchback coupe. Prettier than an asparagus fern, but practical. Compact, but with lots of room and comfort. A great big hatchback in the rear, and Buick's funky V6 up front. Buick, you've got a real chrome thumb. That's a little joke.
Buick Skylark. It's so practical. It's beautiful.
The Super Bowl game is in Pasadena, California, in the Rose Bowl on Sunday, and all of the crowding and the traffic jams will be there. But Pasadena is a little irritated because that's about all that'll be there. The merrymaking and the spending of money will be elsewhere. Jack Perkins has looked into this serious problem, and his findings are as follows.
When a super event like the Super Bowl comes to a town like Pasadena, the town is supposed to be thrilled because of the money and magic that fall upon it also. Well, we've been poking around Pasadena a bit and find there are good reasons why some people here aren't thrilled at all.
Not thrilled, you say, to be host this week to the greatest stars of football? No, because Pasadena hasn't been. The Minnesota Vikings, for some reason, are staying in this hotel in Costa Mesa, 50 miles from Pasadena. The Oakland Raiders, probably for the same reason, are staying in this hotel in the town of Newport Beach, 60 miles from Pasadena. Now, this week, the greatest stars of football have been about as far from Pasadena as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The magic of the Super Bowl includes showbiz stars rehearsing a television special for Super Bowl Eve. But Pasadenans will have to watch it on TV because the show and the stars are in Burbank. Isn't Pasadena thrilled at the money that comes to local businessmen? Well, the contractor who built the $20,000 bubble studio atop the stadium was not from Pasadena, but the town of Chatsworth. The NFL is catering a bash for Saturday night. 6 tons of food, including 1 octopus for 2,500 people. But the catering is being done in L.A. and will be trucked into Pasadena. No, much of the money and magic will elude Pasadena. What Pasadena will get is the last-minute congestion of 106,000 people. And Pasadena police, who worked virtually round the clock for the Rose Bowl last weekend, will get the chance to do it again this weekend. Jack Perkins, NBC News, Pasadena.
And that's it for David and me for this week. We'll be back on Monday. Until then, good night for NBC News.
Out here, we don't use many medicines. We stick with what we know is good. So, now and then, when constipation's a problem, but that chocolate X-Lax help. I always know just how to work. Gently, overnight, for relief in the morning. Plus, my family likes the taste. And that counts, too. I've heard more families buy X-Lax than any other brand. People know what's good. Now you know, too.
Try gentle chocolated X-Lax. Good medicine at a good price.
Energy for a strong America. Shouldering America's energy needs is a job Exxon's been helping to do for years. It's a job that takes experience, technical know-how, financial stability, and every bit of efficient organization that Exxon can provide. So Exxon has put all of these strengths and capabilities together to bring oil, gas, and other energy directly to you. Energy for a strong America.
Time on television, the real story of the most daring rescue mission of our time. Raid on Entebbe, starring Peter Finch, Yaphet Kotto, and Charles Bronson as General Dan Shomron. The major motion picture about the commando strike that thrilled the world. Raid on Entebbe. This Super Bowl Sunday at 8, 7 Central Time on NBC.
Smart bunch of ladies, the Bombers, because they elected me coach and my new Buick Regal team bus. Nice big trunk, V6 engine, and of course the Buick ride and interior do wonders for morale. And driving up in a Buick is a good way to psych the competition. Besides, this Regal is a great team incentive, because if they don't win, they walk. Want to be captain?
Jennifer, aren't you ready yet? Mrs. Hall, your future mother-in-law, will be here any minute.
Mother, have you got something strong for a headache?
Have I got something strong for a headache?
Vanquish is strong medicine. Vanquish has more pain